I suggest that you mute everyone instead of people getting to mute themselves. Just mute everyone and disable the ability to unmute yourself, save for the host and the co-host.
Okay, let me focus on what I'm doing here, because can you see my screen? No.
We can see you,
Yeah.
but your screen is not sharing as yet.
Yeah, okay, fine. In the way, the focus was on for now while I'm still sorting this thing out. Anyway, I'll take care of that just now. We are live, everyone. I'm just quickly sharing my screen. I'll sort out the issue of people muting and unmuting themselves just now in a minute. Welcome to 230 Conversations. This is the day that the Lord has made. We shall therefore rejoice and be glad in it. We shall also converse about this hot potato of a topic that most people find a bit hot to handle. At this point, we are aiming not to reserve any comments, not to spare and reserve anything in any way. Let's have an open, honest, frank conversation. I'm saying this in the backdrop of knowing Prof. Shepherd. Just briefly, sorry guys. Just when you thought you have Rona figured out, somehow it evades you. Ashley,
Gebo,
are you able to mute everyone if I could mute your host?
No, I can't. Unfortunately, I'm on the phone.
That's
so
fine.
I'm unable to.
Worry not, I've got it. Okay. Just when I thought I used Zoom, now it's showing me flames. Okay, I've muted everyone, yeah? And I'm not allowing anyone to unmute themselves, and I'm hoping when people jump in, they will not cause a distraction. Welcome to 230 Conversations. Let's do this, where we talk, we engage, we converse, we think, and we make announcements. Aligned with that is the announcements of a king that is able to save, aligned with that of a God who's able to carry us through this generation that we are in as we live our little short lives on this earth. So 230 Conversations is found on most and all of the social media platforms that you can think of. We are on Facebook. I would like to believe we are live now. We are soon to be on Instagram. TikTok, you'll find us there. But most importantly, YouTube. It's highly likely that by the end of the day today, we probably would be live. I mean, the video here, YouTube, for the episode for today would be uploaded. All right. Now, as you would know, religion and the world is this month's theme in general. So we are on religion. Last week we had a fruitful conversation with Umfundisi, Pastor Chulankosi, about politics and religion. And then this week we are at a point where we're going to talk to racism and religion. To a certain extent, last week Desmiko showed are we on racism and religion or politics and religion somehow, but it ended up becoming clear as we went on with the program. So next week we'll be dealing with the following issues that I'll announce just in a minute. So today we are with Prof, racism and religion. Let's talk about what that means to you, your lived and personal experiences, and also from a Prof's point of view, as we'll be leading us forward with this conversation. So next week we are dealing with also religion, LGBTQI+. You know how it goes. So we'll be speaking to this gentleman who we met not so long ago, Ashley, at the SID studios, telling a story through a book. He will probably tell us also about his book when he joins us next week on the 23rd of April. The week after that, as we close the month, we'll be speaking to religion and spiritualism. Those of you who got a chance to catch on to the Facebook Live, or if those were at Rosebank, may realize between this one last week, can't remember his name, he was grappling with that topic hands on. He was dealing with that topic. So we'll be talking to religion and spiritualism. And then the month that follows that, pardon me, I'm starting with the wrong slide. The month that follows that is the money encounter. We'll be speaking to money and finances and so on and so forth. Entrepreneurship and the practical guide. We'll be speaking to Mr. O Chakarisa. He'll be taking us through that. So the speakers that will be following after that for a tithe and offering are still yet to be finalized and confirmed, as well as Black poverty and money and its classes. Money and its classes. So those are still up and coming. Sitela, also to bear in mind that ITM contributions are still welcome, and we are open to receiving from anyone who's willing to share so that other people will be willing to join. And while you contemplate on that, please do share the page far and wide so that people would have knowledge of who we are and what we do and what kind of a reach and kind of influence and impact do we strive to achieve. So having said that, we are at this point where I'm just going to briefly ask Uprof to take over. I'm going to stop the share, and then I'm going to ask him to lead us through with the conversation. As soon as I find him, I'm pretty sure he's a host himself. You can please unmute yourself, Prof. All right, there we go.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let me quickly pin you. Quickly pinned you. So at this point, please lead us through the conversation, Prof. You are one of our own. You know the drill. So please just take us through. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Leander. Thanks for the invite, and good afternoon to everyone. I've thrown the messages to the side. So if there's anything that arises that needs my attention, Leander, you can interrupt and tell me. Don't send me a message. I won't be able to read it.
We'll do so.
Yes. So greetings from the mother city, Cape Town. We might be. I don't know if it will ever happen. I asked for water from the hotel like 20 minutes ago. I still haven't received my water. So I might get a disturbance on my door when they bring the water. But that will not be a big problem. When we go through the Bible, issues of discrimination and equality and human dignity are actually dealt with extensively, without necessarily mentioning thou shalt not be a racist, or thou shalt not dominate others, or thou shalt not enslave or subjugate others and stuff. But at the core of the biblical message are issues of equality. And one is 1 Corinthians 1 verse, 1 Corinthians 12, rather 13. It tells us that we're all baptized by one spirit and we are part and also form one body, right? Without necessarily discriminating whether one is a Jew or Gentile. And then there it comes, excuse me, just a moment. It took so long. All right. And then a multiple of others. But one of the most interesting things when we try to justify discrimination, especially as Africans largely, or even as Christians, where we lack diversity, whether it's gender diversity, whether it's identity diversity, racial, ethnic, and stuff. We all run to say everyone is equal in the eyes of the Lord. Therefore, even if it's a woman who preaches this week, next week, and all other 50 weeks that are coming in the year, is fine. We're all equal before the Lord. The Lord doesn't see gender, whatever. And you quickly have to go to Revelation when they talk about the gates of heaven and who they are named after or how they are named. And then you will realize that actually to God, identities do matter. And if they matter to God, therefore to individuals, they should also matter, right? God is not saying that there are individuals or there are certain identities or ethnic racial groups that are more superior than others. But that recognition of the tribes of Israel is quite important to note that actually to God, identities are important and are vital, and therefore they do matter, right? And as I said, there's a plethora of verses that actually discuss these kinds of identities, oneness in Christ and equality and all that. But one of the most important things that we should note as a point of departure is that religion, especially Christianity, even though born in Africa, gains its currency and is spread largely through colonialism and through the colonial project. And this delivers the world into problems that we are facing now. It delivers also the Adventist church as we know it currently configured now into some problems. And most of you would agree with me that we navigate this world differently based on our racial identities, right? I navigate and experience the world firstly largely through my skin color. Everywhere you go, you have to be questioning yourself because you're black, or you know, that's why certain things are happening to you, or that's why you are seeing things in a certain way. Or white people rarely ever question their identities, whether the world is as they experience it because of their whiteness, because ontologically whiteness is seen as being human. That is the ultimate humanity. And therefore they do not question most of these things. It's almost, for clarity purposes, like being a man. If you decide to jog, if I decide to jog at 6 p.m. in the evening, all I'm worried about is maybe to a certain extent my safety, but nothing more. But if a woman is supposed to jog at that point in time, one, she has to be afraid of black men, white men, maybe possibly white women who are driving, who might run over and stuff like that, right? Some of the things that as a black man, I will never be mindful about or be mindful of. And I don't even think about these things, and I don't even ask myself, the fact that I'm not thinking about them, is it because I'm a man? But it's largely because I'm a man, that's why I'm blind to it. So white people navigate this world with a certain level of blindness, right? And the way that they see the world. Frantz Fanon actually puts it this way in Black Skin, White Mask. It was White Mask, Black Skin. The white man exists because of the existence of black men, right? It's without the black man, the white man wouldn't exist as a white man. And therefore that existence of whiteness is comparative. And the white man, through the powers that he has, economic, colonialism, subjugation, and slavery, has taught the black man to see the world as he sees it. And the white man sees the black man as nothing. And therefore the black man sees himself as nothing and the other black person as nothing also. And this, if you use this lens to look at, for instance, xenophobia and other things that happen in black communities, how our black leaders, institutionally, politically, and even religiously, how they treat ordinary black people, then you'd understand how whiteness is a devastating consequences in shaping and molding the black ways of thinking. So before I proceed, I want us to just look at this video first. I think it will be better for me to play the video and then show my slides. this may you let me know if you hearing my sound.
Yeah, I just had some notes over piano. Cala kanjalo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's audible.
It is time.
It is time. It is time. It is time.
It is time.
It is time for Andrews University to apologize for the systemic racism it has perpetuated on its campus.
Since 1874, this institution has too often mirrored the bigotry of American society, rather than reflecting the true values of Jesus Christ.
Black students and their families have often submitted grievances expressing the racism and hate that they've experienced,
From past grievances such as forced segregation in cafeteria,
to present grievances, such as a lack of proper ethnic representation among faculty and administration. For decades, our friends and our family have asked for a response, but our university has remained silent. You would think that after 143 years, a faith-based university would feel compelled to follow the biblical counsel on reconciliation.
you would think that it would have already said, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And yet, Andrews, like the United States of America, has championed the story of Jesus, but hasn't followed the counsel of Jesus.
So here we are.
Asking once again for an apology that should have been given generations ago.
Our administration has shown us that responding to grievances only takes 1 week. 1 week.
1 week. 1 week. You have 1 week.
To release a formal statement of apology for the wrongful discrimination against Black students of this institution.
Not only apologizing for past discrimination, but acknowledging the presence of current discrimination. You have 1 week. 1 week to not only apologize, but to commit to making the measurable changes that will ensure that future generations will not have to experience what we have experienced.
Changes such as
Mandating that all faculty and staff receive diversity training in order to maintain employment.
ensuring that the ethnicity of the faculty and staff properly reflect the diversity of the student body.
Providing classes that are taught from a perspective other than the perspective of Eurocentric values.
And stop allowing professors and worship leaders to demonize our style of worship.
You have 1 week.
1 week to speak to our often dismissed concerns.
1 week to reverse the narrative that the concerns of our counterparts are valued more than our own. 1 week to honor those who have survived ill treatment. 1 week to acknowledge the jaded racial history of this institution.
1 week to draft a manifesto that will ensure our equal treatment for years to come.
1 week to say,
I'm sorry.
we should have done better.
We will do better. We're waiting.
We're waiting. We're waiting. We're waiting. We're waiting. You have 1 week.
Andrews University is owned by my church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And this is a video from 2019. And my church we believe that we probably the best in terms of interpreting the Bible. We believe that we are God chosen, and we believe that we are heavenward bound. But after watching this video, some questions arise in my mind that where has the Spirit been for all these years, and even up to today, because this has not been fully addressed, right? And we need to sort of speak about this. But for starters, I will just run through my presentation and then see where we wind up. So when I look at at racism, we speak about the subordination of people of color by white people. This is what racism is, right? It draws from conquest, it draws from colonialism, it draws from slavery, and looting not only the humanity of the Black people, but also looting their resources to build a white-dominated and white-centric institutions, economies, legal structures, and the like, right? And my argument is very simple from the start and from the proven academic studies and history, that Black people cannot be racist. Black people cannot be racist, I repeat. While individual persons of color may well discriminate against a white person or another person of color because of their race, this does not qualify as racism, because that person of color cannot depend upon all the institutions of society to enforce or extend his or her personal dislike, nor call upon the force of history to reflect and enforce that prejudice. History provides us with a long record of white people holding and using power and privilege over people of color to subordinate them, and not the reverse. And when later on I speak about coloniality and decoloniality, you will see how the legacies of colonialism still function and shape the world. And I've traveled to a lot of European cities and countries. And one of the most interesting things that sitting in Cape Town now, if I walk around, I don't experience Cape Town as an African city. I experience it as a European city because the architecture and the texture of the city is just, you know, someone is not muted here. And then when we speak about religion, we basically talking about the belief and worship of a human controlling power, right? We can speak about God, or we can speak about God, whatever way some people might want to view it or to look at it. And there's a nexus between race, religion, and colonialism. There's an intersection historically that is quite important to how the faithful, when I say the faithful, I mean religious people, whatever your religious orientation or worship or beliefs are, whether it's Christianity, Islam, or whatever it is. So they meet somewhere, somehow, and inform each other, right? And in the beginning, Christianity was, and this is the beginning of the aggressive spread of Christianity to the whole world, or to the global south. By the global south, I mean your Asia, Minor Asia, your Africa, you know, and the global north we refer to the Americas and Europe and the like. And Christianity was in service of the state or the empire in the European colonial powers, which had, and these powers in power, that is, the leadership was largely Christians. And therefore Christianity comes in service of the state institutions and the civilization agenda that they have, and the economic agenda that they have when they try to colonize the rest of the world. And Christian missionaries acted as religious appendages and arms of the state, where they were meant to be exemplary Christians to savages in the global south when they were colonizing them. And when Christianity comes to the rest of the world, it's largely as a civilizing tool, because Africans are seen as savages who are sort of satanic and irretrievable to be humanized, right? And therefore colonization through religion sort of redeems them from the depths of savagery and tries to mold them into human beings like white people, because people of color were not, black people were not seen as fully human beings, but just as savages. Even when slave trade happens, the slaves are not seen as fully human beings, but as labor machinery, right? Even their reproduction is sort of reproduction of labor. And there's that alienation in family, in slave families during the colonial times or during the slavery times, where the workers for white people in the plantations were not seen as responsible parents who are supposed to be fully involved in the raising of their children. And this alienation has actually continued for years, to an extent that the challenges that the black people in America face now actually draws largely from that. I know there are certain arguments that says people should be responsible now for what you call for what happens to them and all those kinds of things. The world is a totally different place in this day and age. For mostly black people, it doesn't work like that. More so for mostly black Americans, it doesn't work like that, because most of them are a product of violence. And violence actually happens almost on a daily basis in the school, in churches, in the streets. And we know, we saw the killing of Brian Taylor and Trayvon Martin, George Floyd. And those are lives that were not even supposed to be lost. But because a black man, a black person is seen as an animal, and the life of a black person is can easily be dispensed of. So it's sort of easier for America to treat its black people like that. And it's easier for the world actually to treat black people like that. You may argue that there are a few good white people and stuff, but the system is bigger than the individual. The system of colonialism, the system of whiteness and Eurocentrism are bigger than individuals, and therefore they rule the world and override the goodness of those few that we may have experienced or we think that they exist. So when we speak about racism in the Adventist Church, or Adventism and racism, especially in Africa, when it starts, the Adventist Church was almost 20 years ahead of apartheid South Africa in terms of introducing racial discrimination. And this is how developed and sophisticated the church is in terms of these issues and being racist, right? And racism still endures in our religious institutions and Adventism. And listen to one of the guys in the video. There's a longer video, about an hour or so, where they speak about their experiences. One, academics at Andrews, maybe in religious classes or whatever, they give examples and talk about how savage black people's ways of worship are, how it is spiritualism, as if there's anything wrong with being spiritual. And you know, it's undermined in academic spaces in the class. It's undermined from the pulpit, right? And there's this bizarre belief that when Africans before colonialism never had the conception of God, right? And we also argue that religion started from Africa. And let's grant that there are differences in terms of worship. I know, for instance, when we're growing up, my people would pray for rain, and they'll pray for rain to God, not to ancestors. But they accessed God via ancestors, right? In as much as we access God via Jesus, if you don't, you can go to the Father through me, right? That's what Jesus teaches us. And here, I'm not trying to justify anything. I'm trying to make us understand and contextualize issues. So there's never been any historical evidence that Africans worshipped ancestors. Never. I've never come across such religions. I've never come across such communities, and I've never come across such cultures. Africans accessed God through some of them, through their ancestors. They believe that when a person dies, it's not that they've expired, but they move to another space, to a certain space, right? And there's that importance of dead bodies and of death as a mysterious event and a mysterious space and a mysterious sort of existential experience that almost everyone goes through. To an extent that one might question, there's some patriarchs in the Bible that actually asked to be buried in the graveyards of their families. If a dead body, a dead person is useless, why don't you just leave them where they are? So there's something unique and curious about death. But my point is, Africans never used to worship ancestors. There's no evidence to that effect. But they had a conception of God and how to worship that particular, how to worship God. And we had a conception of religion and were religious and spiritual in different places, in different ways. And when religion comes to Africa, it's not only a civilizing tool, but also it's violence, it's violating the identities of the people, it's violating their cultures, it's violating their humanity. And they're ostracized from certain cultures and identities, to an extent that when they start worshiping in Christianity, they don't have a basis and a base of knowing who they are, right? You speak about the attire that is expected of you in worship, and you wonder, where does that come from? And you will see later on when we speak about coloniality and decoloniality, the devastating effects of colonialism. And also, if Jesus grows up, is born in the Middle East, right? And you have this iconography that presents him as white, and it's brought through the ages, and everyone believes that. And you have infantile arguments, especially by Adventists, that I've experienced. Oh, if you don't like a white Jesus, why don't you throw your own? Nonsense. That's not where the question is. That's not where the matter is. The matter is, what does that iconography mean at the end of the day? It's not what that iconography is currently, right? You have to get that sophisticated engagement with that particular iconography. Because if iconography doesn't matter, if imagery doesn't matter, why does it matter to God in the building of the temple when he gives the sanctuary, he gives the measurements and everything? It has to look like this, it has to picture this, it has to, right? And if religion comes, biblical text is written in Africa and stuff, how do you get a white Jesus at the end of the day, right? And I sympathize, I understand people who say that Jesus' real color doesn't matter. And because that for me really concludes the matter, because he never existed once you want to venture into that particular direction. One, it lacks intellectual sophistication. Two, it just shows the effects of coloniality and colonialism in your mind at the end of the day. But the most important thing that we need to engage with is, what does it mean when Jesus is painted as white? I've said that people who believe that the color of Jesus is love and it doesn't matter should not be allowed to have children, or are not allowed to breed, or even not allowed to be closer to our children, because they're going to poison their minds. Because it speaks largely to an inferiority complex in that particular context, in that particular individual. And when we say that his color doesn't matter. He might as well never have existed. If he did exist, then who was he? What did he look like? And what does it mean? Why was he appropriated as white? And why is it that you have problems when Jesus is painted, is imagined as black? Don't tell me to form my own church, or don't tell me to draw my own Jesus. Let's engage with those particular issues and why is it important. Some of our people's inferiority complexes are actually brought about or born about because of these imaginations, right? You run church programs in an orderly fashion, at least for my church, we run in an orderly fashion, but why do we have to have a march that is thought of in America and then I'm supposed to do it in Kailicha, or I'm supposed to do it in Philabus, where we don't even, you want us to wear red and march about drugs, but we don't have a drug problem that side, we have a water problem. We need boreholes and stuff. Why can't we march for boreholes, right? Why is it that the adult Sabbath school is a mission story, and mostly it's white European missionaries who are going to Africa to save Africa? Or if a story is told, it's usually people from the global south who are telling us how they used to worship ancestors, how they used to voodoo worship and all those kinds of things. Why is it that when monies are being collected and given, it's always going to do mission in Africa? And why is it that our children's stories, they don't have Nomsa, they don't have Tatenda, they don't have Noma Sigo? They are not representative of us. And if you dare write your own children's booklet, no one will buy it in Africa. They want something from Europe, right? And this is what the colonial effect has done. And this is what partly issues of misrepresentation have done, because whiteness is equated to purity, is equated to leadership, is equated to full humanity. And there are many synonyms of black, and there's none that is positive. And we see it like that. Even in terms of power, who wields power? Who has to get? Who's going to hold power, right? Who is in charge? A few weeks back, Pastor Mazibuko talked about the racism that they experienced as black students in Elderbeck, just down a few kilometers from here. And he says no one tried to intervene from the top offices just because whites fund the university. Is it a college or university? I don't even know what it is, but you know. So the most important thing is, don't we draw something from that whiteness of Jesus and then whiteness of white people and then the power that they wield, and then we put black people at the bottom. And the issues of hierarchies, by the way, they do matter in the Adventist Church. Most of you remember your elders when an American preacher has come, or when some white guy from the conference has come for a service. Your deacon will introduce your elder. Your elder will tell you how inadequate and inferior he is. And then he will introduce your head elder. Your head elder will also come and participate in this festival of madness and inferiority. Tell us how small he is. Then introduce your local pastor, and then your local pastor is the one who introduces the conference guy. And some of them are your fathers or your husbands, uncles, right? And all this, when you watch it critically, you might say it's order of service and all these kinds of things. But what does it do at the end of the day? What does it tell you about the power relation? It's not even biblical, by the way. It's not. That kind of behavior is not. but we need when we arrive at this juncture to, and this is where all of us have a responsibility to disrupt the system. If you have the energy to do it, you can disrupt the system. But if you are irretrievably anchored in coloniality, then it will be fine. When we speak of decoloniality, largely we're speaking about something that is different from decolonizing as upsetting colonialism. So colonialism denotes a political and economic relation in which the sovereignty of a nation or a people rests on the power of another nation, which makes such a nation an empire, right? Britain was an empire, Belgium in the Congo was an empire, Portugal was an empire, France, an empire in the Francophone Africa. By the way, there's an interesting, when I was doing my first year at university, if you made a phone call during landline times before cell phones, was it Mali or Senegal or Cameroon? So when you make a phone call, it had to go through an exchange when you had lines, right? So you're calling your neighbor next door, but that phone call has to go to France and then be routed back to your neighbor next door. So this is how powerful these systems were and how powerful they still are, because most Western powers have army bases in Africa, and this is not sort of addressed by Africans, and the meanings of those are not. So colonialism and its effects, they still exist. So when we speak about colonialism, we're speaking about the sovereignty of the people or nation resting on the power of another nation and stuff. And then when we speak about coloniality, we're then referring to the long-standing patterns of power that emerged as a result of colonialism. So colonialism teaches you that being a gentleman is wearing a suit and tie, right? Regardless of the weather. I've seen people sweating through their jackets, preaching in churches because of suit and tie, right? And when those patterns that have emerged as a result of colonialism, they continue to exist and define your culture, labor, intersubjectivity relations, and also knowledge production, well beyond the strict limits of colonial administrations. The administrator could have packed and left, but he lives miniatures in his own image. Look at Robert Mugabe, for instance. He's an Anglophile, British drinking, British tea, drinking African, you know, speaks good English, everything about him, rides a Rolls Royce when he's going to address crowds at the National Sports Stadium, even rides a car that was left by the colonial masters when he's doing all these rituals, right? So what happens is that coloniality survives colonialism. In as much as the colonialist is picked and left, he has left an impression that is in the minds of the people now, that people cannot revert back to the way that they organized themselves in pre-colonial societies. And here I will preempt a question that says, do you want us to go back to the olden days where we wore cow skins and stuff and all that? Quite nonsensical, really. This is not even the argument, but the larger scheme of things is what coloniality continues to do, or what colonialism, the debris or the remnants of colonialism continues to do in the global south. So this is maintained alive in our universities, in our books, in our churches. The criteria for academic performance is quite colonial. By the way, Africa at universities long back, we got exposed, before we got exposed to some universities in the global north. In common sense, in self-image of peoples, in aspirations, colonialists actually magnified issues of ethnicity and tribes to an extent that in Rwanda, you have a genocide created partly because of how colonialists configured social relations and ethnic relations. And so as modern subjects, currently, we breathe coloniality all the time and every day. Our order, services of worship, the way we do things in the Christian space is also informed by coloniality, what we're taught by colonialists, right? We see no other way of worshiping God. We don't have space for our own songs. You can't in Mnambi today write your own hymn book and say let's have our own Zulu songs and let's sing them before. No. You have to follow the Adventist music. By Adventist music, we mean borrowing, collection, and domestication of things that are, of songs and poems that are not even from Adventist writers. And then we call them Adventist, and we all believe that they are actually Adventist. And Ngugi wa Thiong'o speaks about colonialism having a mental and intellectual dimensions. And by the way, one of the biggest things that Africans are prolific in is compliance. And this is compliance with and to Western dictates. You know, we comply on how our services are supposed to be held. We comply on the order of what, and all these things. We comply even when GC sends you sermons and say on the youth week of what, we are going to read this, or loving, what is it? Loving the unloved. What was this thing that we were talking about a few weeks back? Loving. Africans have never been in a space to love each other. We've never been taught to love each other. All we know from religion is to forgive and to love those who hate you. But we've never been taught to love our families. You have never heard a whole day talking about love in your church and how to love properly, you know? And most of us, our relations are strained because we've never taught and been told how to love each other, right? And what colonialists and colonizers also do is that they impose the mystified image of their own patterns of producing knowledge and meaning. Some of the things you found them being done in your religious organization and institution, and you insist that people have to follow that, but you cannot explain. No one can explain why I need to wear a tie when I'm doing a presentation or when I'm preaching, a tie and a jacket. My people never wore that, right? And of course, my imagination of decency will not. Have you ever seen men who wear ties? They wear these tight-fitting clothes, and then you can see their genitalia. So he's in a tie and a suit and whatever. Is that decent? Because you've called that decent. You know, so those issues around decency and whatever, they don't necessarily have to come through European garbs or through colonizers' garbs or through what we taught by colonizers. At first, they placed these patterns far out of reach of the dominated. Later, they taught them a partial and selective way in order to co-opt some of the dominated into their own power institutions. And this is quite interesting. If you look at, it's almost like you cannot challenge the conference and the GC and stuff. Your pastor will likely block you. And so pastors are sort of functionaries of the system in that particular way. And you have your village heads, you have your chiefs in some cases, you have heads of institutions, you have presidents and whatever. And they are in service not of their people, but in service of the system or the colonial system that is left, but still remains deeply rooted within the psyche and the functionality of the system's economics, culture, and all those kinds of things. So there's that seductivity of Europeanness that we cannot do away with, right? And this is probably why some of our African countries and institutions cannot have plans beyond 5 years. Everyone is thinking about tomorrow. Only in the West, you have countries planning for 2060. Even though you won't be there, but you have that intellectual wisdom to plan further ahead rather than around yourself. And so as I'm trying to say, and I'm quoting Ngugi here, as he says that the mental universe of the colonized, the control through culture of how people perceive themselves and their relationships to the world. Economic and political control can never be complete or effective without mental control, right? To control a people's culture is to control their tools of self-definition and relations to others. The domination of a people's language by languages of the colonizing nations was crucial to the domination of the mental universe of the colonized. I know most of us worship in English, and just that I was talking to some of the friends here about the importance of vernacular languages, you know, and some will tell you that we changed the way we worship when maybe we got foreigners in our church, then we moved from our languages to accommodate them. And now some of them have taken over, which is actually part of how colonialism is shaped us, because we now can easily colonize each other. And then when we speak about decolonizing or decoloniality, we speak about dismantling the relations of power and conceptions of knowledge that foment the reproduction of racial, gender, and geopolitical hierarchies that come into being or found new and more powerful forms of expressions in the modern colonial world. And Christianity can actually adopt some of the radical changes, especially from the global south. Not all programs that will come from your head office in America or in Britain are relevant to you. But because you're big on compliance, because of the coloniality, because of your imagination where power lies, you will not dismantle that, right? So the call is for us to sort of decolonize, to rethink the way that we can do things. You can even effectively worship God without necessarily following a pamphlet or a set of sermons for a week of prayer that doesn't even speak to your people, that doesn't speak to the fiercely urgent needs of your community. And Torres further says that, Maldonado Torres further says that decoloniality seeks to unmask, unveil, and reveal coloniality as an underside of modernity that coexisted with this rhetoric of progress, equality, fraternity, and liberty. And modernity and Eurocentrism are actually interlinked, and they can cause negative effects in communities that are not ready for that level or that style of modernity, because communities modernize differently and in their own paces. And you know, there are certain technologies that you might make do with from the West. There are certain ones that you necessarily don't need in your context, right? By technologies, I don't mean computer-based or whatever. Ways of doing things, ways of thinking, ways of socializing. You cannot, for instance, say just because now you have WhatsApp, you can attend a funeral on WhatsApp. Africans are not like this. Is actually antithetical to Ubuntu, right? And one of the most important things, I'm so tired. one of the most important things is what remains at large in the African context is decolonizing the human. Decolonizing the human and decolonizing the minds of the people. Tabashi said that a colonized mind is occupied by the European right or by the cliche-ridden left. It is an occupied territory devoid of detail, devoid of substance, devoid of love, devoid of caring intellect. And this speaks about us in most African global South settings. We think we're now modern, especially people in the cities. We think we're now modern, we can't relate in certain ways. We've been consumed by ways of one, consumerism, industrialization, individualism, and as I said, all these inimical to Ubuntu, but seem to be so in the forefront and in the center of what the global North teaches us and what civilization and modernity want to teach us. It smells, he continues, of mothballs and is nauseating. Of course, Europeans are Eurocentric and see the world from their vantage point. And why should they not? They are the inheritors of multiple now defunct empires, and they still carry with them the phantom hubris of those empires. They believe their particular philosophy is philosophy and their particular thinking is thinking, while everyone else is, as great European philosopher Emmanuel Levinas was wont to say, dancing. So they see the rest of the world is nothing, right? To an extent that, as Samantha Weiss argues that whiteness, being white, should be actually worn as a badge of shame, should be equated to shame. And this is the argument. It's almost like being a man should be worn as a badge of shame, because there are certain privileges that accrue to white people that they don't even work hard for, but they accrue to them. They get them just because they are white, right? And this is how white people experience the religious spaces. This is how they experience Christianity. This is how they experience Adventism. That's why they'll kick you out of their church and nothing happens, and everyone else, your black conference presidents, are quiet, right? Because ontologically, whiteness is humanity, is being, is wealth, is power, is close to the godliness, is purity. And therefore, how dare you challenge purity, right? You can't. And this cascades down to our communities, to our churches, and to individual families. That challenging whites is Steve Biko said. Steve Biko says that when fighting oppression, you have to fight with one end, the other end is to be fighting your fellow blacks. And this is the same thing in the Adventist space, by the way. Debate the issue of white iconography of Jesus. There's whiteness there, and then there's mediocre blackness there that wants to defend that particular system. Hi, Leanne, I'm tired now.
Hey, hey, as you academics, you think the same. You know, even Nomtama Imagala, the last time he was here, I think it was 2 years ago, he spoke and spoke and spoke. I'm tired now. Can we have questions? Can we engage? Anyway, in any event,
So I can't even go for. I'm supposed to go and see the sunset by the Temple Mountain.
Yeah.
Which is nature. Okay. Ellen White says we must engage with nature.
All right. Is it not raining that side?
No. I wonder if you can see outside my window. It's sunny.
Wow.
It's sunny.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure you'll also be able to relate with the thick racism that we always hear about with the Cape Town. It's as thick as a cloud. It's as thick as a cumulonimbus cloud, apparently.
So interestingly, I'm closer to, it's called Long Street, which has clubs, restaurants and stuff, which are multiracial and largely black. And then 2 streets up the road, they say it's mostly whites who don't want to associate with blacks, but you have few blacks who are outliers who associate with them. So that's South Africa, that's Cape Town for you. But yeah.
Yeah, no, anyway, thank you so much for that sharing. That sort of like deep, to a certain extent it was deep. But nevertheless, this is your chance, guys. Let's have a conversation. I'll even check on page Facebook with it in talk. My 2 cents is maybe not in the context of religion, né? But in the context of general life. I'm of the view that I don't really care how whites view me. I know, unfortunately or fortunately rather, I've never experienced that whole whereby you are ostracized to a point whereby it makes your life a living difficulty. But as far as I'm concerned, to me, if you hate me, that's your business. If you get along with me, that's for both our benefit. Those are my views in regards to where I am with this, retaliation. Of course, the narrative is different for people who are in the United States because they are not going all out to make anyone else a difficulty. They're just living their lives. But instead, they are getting attacked. They're getting killed just for walking on the street and so on and so forth. So that's a different dynamic altogether. And I'm pretty sure there's somebody who's in the States or anyone who's in the UK or wherever else would just maybe allude to where that angle or viewpoint is. So that's the general feel on general life as far as I'm concerned. And if that is the case with my general life, waking up every day, going to work, I similarly do not care that much about also how whites treat us, also in the church. Because we cannot deny, to a certain extent, it is favorable to be white in the SDA church than to be black or an African. So just to maybe break the ice here and there, thank you for the hands, guys. Let's have a conversation. Andrew also wanted
let me come in there. We need a much more sophisticated approach in this, because race is not a once-off and individual event. It's a system, right? One, if you don't care what your church, racists in your church do, what do you do when allocation of funds? Maybe you have a preschool you have Durban floods.
Yeah.
And then you have a preschool in a white area that is white owned. And let's say, for argument's sake, there's funds that need to be allocated, and then the white system allocates them to a white preschool, and there are people in Durban, your black people in Durban. That you have not been touched yourself should not matter, but what matters is how the system functions. I think we need that level of surface. The way I engage, or you sort of experience the world, you navigate this world. You have cameras, especially in European and American cities. You have cameras all over the show, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to imagine the people in the monitoring room. How do they sort of view bodies that pass through those cameras? Is the white body viewed any differently from a black body? Definitely not. A black body is suspicious and will be viewed in a certain way. And even look at COVID-19 lockdowns. Why on earth would you have soldiers in killing people, by the way, and beating people up, by the way, in Alexandra, and none in Sentin, none in Morningside, none in Centurion, right? That you're not touched as a black man where you live should not matter. But what should be important is it has to raise outrage, especially if you're paying attention, because if you're not outraged, then you're not paying attention. Okay. we need to engage with these issues at a much more higher level, especially some of us who have children, because we want a better world for our children more than anything else, right?
Yeah.
So that engagement becomes critical. So we should not be in a point where we resign and don't care.
Yeah.
That is a point of death. And I think God will hold you accountable for that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that expanded view, and thank you for that sophisticated approach. So I'm going to take the hand in this order: Andrew, SK, Gugu, Linda, and Van Heeden. Let's start with Andrew. I think he also needs the YouTube link for the video ear retaliation of Ambassador Andrews, but I'll leave him to ask for himself. I've asked you to unmute you, Andrew.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to firstly thank the professor for that excellent presentation. I really learned a lot. I wanted to firstly ask about the YouTube link so that I could watch it myself. So if sir, you could post it in the chat, I'd really appreciate it. Outside of that, I also had another question about what books you could perhaps recommend to better understand racism and religion. And my third question is as it pertains to cultural appreciation and worship. The musical instruments that we usually find, especially where I'm from in West Jamaica, is that you usually find a piano, you usually find an organ, and that's primarily it. Some churches use drums, many don't. You don't see I think you call that the cymbal or the tambourine. You don't find Adventist churches use the tambourine. You'll find that being used in Sunday churches. You'll find drums being played predominantly in Sunday churches, just not Adventist churches. And there's a debate about the use of drums in church. You will never, you don't find the use of like a kete drum or a djembe drum. These are cultural drums. These are drums that one would associate of an African nature. You don't find those drums in church. And even the hymns, it's another conversation in itself, but the use of drums, you don't find. And there's a statement that Ellen White wrote. I posted it in the chat actually. And she had made a remark about an observation somewhere in America. And the language that she used to describe dancing and drums and so on and so forth was not positive. And I feel like the leadership took that. I don't know how they interpreted her statements, but they took it, they ran with it, and they said, okay, so this created like a disregard, or they used it to influence sentiments against the use of drums. I don't know how accurate it is. I really have a lot of questions around it because for one, I'm not comfortable with that. I feel like worship is white in many respects, and it rubs me a certain way as a multicultural, as someone who is from the Caribbean, someone of African descent as well. It rubs me a certain way, and I don't know fully how to process it and how to feel my way through it. So I'm hoping you could speak a bit on that, sir. Thank you.
All right, leader. Sharp. Let's take two more
I
hands.
wait for all those hands.
Yeah, let's just take two more hands. And then
Get some questions. Okay, you can take them.
yeah, and then SK no Gugu. And then after that, Zolandela mo.
Guys, put your videos if you're asking questions. I need to see you.
SK, I've asked you to go ahead. We can hear you in part.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, anyway, all right, no, let me block that. Okay, I have a few pointers here, but first let me ask
the prof wants to see your face, Mama. Holy camera.
No, it's refusing here.
All right, sharp. Kulega, you can go on.
Yeah, first it's a question, then maybe I have a comment. So the question is now, what's the way forward? What's the solution? And what's the point of this presentation? Is it to inform us how oppressing white are and how oppressed Black people are? But what's the point? What's the way forward? That's the first question. That's actually the only question. But I have this idea that when you look at Christianity, it is more mainly wearing Western clothes, you know. It's like even the Christ himself is white. The language of Christianity is English. You would find in a church where it's only Blacks and it's only locals, but the preacher there, for him to be powerful, he must speak English. And we also have even elders who have, what do you call, they major in praying in big word English in order for them to become or to sound powerful. And I used to worship at a church where if you don't know how to preach in English, they will deem you as you are stupid, you know. So I think somehow the gospel came with, you know, let's say he's a person, he came wearing Western clothes and having the Western culture. But now as a result, we Africans, we can't separate the gospel from the culture of the Western culture as well. And now we have people who don't like this Westernism. As a result, they hate even the church that, or the gospel that came with Westernism. We also have the group that likes the gospel and they overlook the Westernism. So we have we have got that dilemma especially in the city churches, because in rural churches you don't find all this nonsense. If it's a Zulu culture, you'll find people preaching in Zulu, and if it's a Tswana culture, you find people like that. But in the cities, we have, even the cities have got Shona against Ndebelés, we've got South Africans against foreigners. It's really not a matter of white and blacks. It's a matter of maybe how the gospel came to us Black people. So we tend to think being oppressed is okay. So if you're in the position of oppressing someone else, you also do the same, you know. Yeah, that was my comment, but I guess you had my question as well. Thanks.
All right, thank you, SK. Let's just take Ukuku for this time, and then we'll follow up with the other two hands. Robin, I've asked you and you to go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Host. I'm not sure if I can put my video on. I don't have a face today.
Go ahead, sir. You can open your video. That's a special request. It's a special request from a special person who gave us a special presentation.
Okay. Thanks a lot for the program and to Betty for bringing this subject to the table. And thanks there to Prof for the presentation. Just a few reflections from my side. I was just looking at some research that was conducted by this institute in the US. It basically shows that white Christians are more racist than you know, whites who are non-Christian.
Than atheists.
Yeah. And the study further showed that non-Christian whites acknowledge the existence of structural racism that most white Christians are in denial of. So maybe it's, I don't know, maybe Prof spoke to this because I didn't catch, you know, the full presentation, but we also need to reflect on the issue of structural racism. I think he did though on the issue of when he was spelling out the difference between colonialism and coloniality. Because colonialism comes to an end when the colonized states get liberated from the imperial states. But there are those elaborate systems, processes, and patterns that continue even in our minds. Now, a lot of Adventists don't have a problem with the fact that there's racism in our societies. Some of us experience this at work, different places where we come across people of different races, how we are treated, even by those of the same race as us, but in the context of environments with whites and so forth. So we can relate to the issue of racism. But I think as Adventists, we generally struggle with the issue of structural racism. Structural racism, we are unable to rise to the level of saying, how do our organizations, entities, institutions as the Seventh-day Adventists, or as the Seventh-day Adventist Church look like in as far as this issue is concerned? We are failing to rise to that level. And connected to that, our homiletics or our religion, our gospel is very sharp at pointing at individual sins. We don't have a struggle in, you know, pointing individuals to Christ to say, go and sin no more and blah, blah. We don't have a struggle there. But if we are to learn something from Christ himself, Christ gave us a robust example and a robust framing of the gospel in the sense that Christ addressed individual sin as much as he addressed systemic problems. We are not quite literate at dealing with systemic issues. That's why we tend to argue a lot as Adventists. I also had a question that was saying, what is the whole point of the presentation? And that may suggest that we are not getting the real object of such conversations, is to say our religious experience needs to rise to acknowledge that we don't practice our religion in a vacuum. We live in a political world. And there is no dichotomy between politics and religion, and therefore there's the issue of racism is very much interwoven into whatever systems religion subsists within. So we need to rise to the level at which Christ articulated the gospel. At some point, Christ left the church. When he went into the temple at some point, he says, what are you doing in the temple, buying and selling and so forth? And then he drives them out and then says, my house will be called a house of prayer. He called the church his house, but later on, when they have ultimately rejected him, because if you read in Matthew 23 and in other areas, he was able to point the finger not just to the individuals, but to the system. Then when it got that hot, Jesus left the church and he said to them, your house is left unto you desolate. Jesus actually left that church and started a new church in the upper room with the disciples. I think generally speaking, as an organization, we've not been diligent enough with dealing with how racism influences our religion and how it is expressed in our religion as an organization. And just as a parting shot, the issue of iconography that Prof touched on, people that argue that color doesn't matter can as well go ahead and argue that it doesn't actually matter that Jesus, the Son of God, had to be human. The object of incarnation was to bring God closer to us, not that he was far, but closer to us in a sense that we can relate to. So the object of incarnation was God saying, this is how so close I am with you. I am going to be exactly like you without necessarily carrying the same propensities of evil that you have. So once we start saying the color of Christ doesn't matter, we are deconstructing incarnation. We are saying we can as well proceed and conclude that Christ was never a human being. If we can dismiss his color, let's dismiss his language, let's dismiss his Jewry or him existing as a Jew. Let's dismiss everything about the human Christ, and then we end up with nothing. So there is a problem with trying to spiritualize things and make things that God has concretized into abstract realities that are not relevant to us. Christ came to live as a human being, and that is redemptive. If we have challenges with understanding the issue of racism in church, let's acknowledge and have such conversations so that we can have a proper framing to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gugu. Yes, over to you, Prof.
Okay, thanks. So the only question, oh yeah, Andrew asked me about drums. And one of the most interesting questions that we have to ask is, when Ellen White writes about issues of instruments and stuff, what is she writing as? Is it as an American or some prophet sitting in heaven? And we need not divorce Ellen White from her identity. And I say this with all seriousness, right? Read Adventist Home issues about Christmas and stuff, where she encourages the celebration of Christmas. And we know that Christmas is a huge American cultural sort of, it's one of the centerpieces of in American culture, and partly consumerism and industrialization and all these kinds of capitalistic things. And if you read that as coming from heaven and as coming from the right-hand side of God, we might need to also rethink certain other things, right? So what I'm trying to say is, it's important for us to rethink and unthink, to relearn and unlearn certain forms and ways of worship and imaginations of our relationship with God. And I won't say let's go out and play drums or let's not play drums, really. This might even call upon people who are like-minded to form their churches where they remain Adventists and they worship God the way that they think is possible, or the way they think generationally they've understood God in that regard. Because even the cymbals, God never gave us notes on how they're supposed to be played. The piano, if it's mentioned in the Bible, we're not told how it's supposed to be. There were no notes about it, right? The rhythm and all those other things, they're not there in the Bible. The songs, how to sing them, it's not there in the Bible, right? And so when we introduce certain instruments just because they are not from the mainstream Western society, we sort of exclude others and think that they are demonic or whatever it is. And there's actually a link in this Eurocentric behavior about how we view Africans and noise. 2010 World Cup, most British media come here and they start writing stories saying that Vuvuzela is noisy. You know Vuvuzela, Andrew? Andrew has dropped off. I can't see him anymore. He's gone. You know the Vuvuzela instrument.
He's here.
Is there.
Yeah,
So British media start writing this Vuvuzela instrument will confuse European players and start describing Africans as they were using animal terminology and stuff. And I'm imagining the perceptions of the drums by some of the founding members of the Adventist Church is this noisy and satanic or whatever, or however they viewed it, to an extent that they wanted it excluded from forms of worship. And this, by the way, is some of the conditions by Black people at Andrews University, where they were sort of raising their concerns, right? So a drum is a huge instrument in African societies for different purposes, used for different occasions. In any case, the usage of the instrument doesn't translate it into the into the occasion of that particular space and particular event. For instance, if an instrument is used in ancestral what do you call, in some events where ancestors are being called to intervene, be it a wedding, be it a funeral and stuff, or even if a drum is used at a funeral, it doesn't necessarily cement and locate the drum into funerals, and therefore it cannot enter a church because it is now soiled, right? So what is the argument against the drum? And by the way, the same arguments have been raised about jazz music in mainstream white American academy and American society and churches, that jazz is inherently satanic and evil, right? And what is that based on? Is it based on the instrument? Is it based on the perceptions of the people that came up with the instrument or the type of music? You know, which is quite problematic and needs to be engaged with. But definitely, I won't be able to be in a position to say, okay, let's play this drum in the church or whatever. Mm. And then the books. So I don't necessarily. I'll give you some Adventist books by the authors, but I'm really uneasy to encourage people to say read Adventist writings on this, because it's protectionist. There are some things that you might not get that that won't open our minds. But to start with, there's I gave you my number there. You can WhatsApp me later on. I'll find more resources. But there's Louis B. Reynolds' book on We Have Tomorrow, speaking about the story of Adventists within African heritage. We Have Tomorrow by Reynolds. And then we have Mission to Black America. There's a book, Mission to Black America, by Ronald Gray Bill. Gray with an A, Bill, American Bill. And then there's one of the most important books, I think, yet ever written by an Adventist scholar and leader is, what's that book? Protest and Progress by Calvin B. Rock. Was a pastor, so you expect a pastoral read, passionate also. Protest and Progress. And then you have Samuel Landon Jr.'s book, Seventh-day Adventists and the Civil Rights Movement. And then there's Kendi, Kendi. He's not an Adventist, he's a Black scholar in the Black Studies scholarship in America. Kendi's book, it's got a huge volume. What is it called? Kendi. I'm just trying to find the title. Oh, Stamped from the Beginning. I think that's one of the definitive histories of race in America. There are certain chapters that deal with religion. So that book will be sort of helpful. I will via WhatsApp try to look for the long video and send it to you. And the fact that the import of the presentation is still at large, I don't know. I'm not. When I spoke about decoloniality and coloniality, that's where I said you have to come in and rethink and think certain things. So I'm not largely prescriptive in that direction, but when you look at decoloniality and coloniality, this is where we are, right? And my presentation actually speaks about race and then moves to coloniality and decoloniality to locate a space where we can exercise agency as individual members of society, one, secondly, as spiritual persons, and thirdly, as members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, right? So if you serve as an elder, if you serve as a youth leader, what is it that you can do to decolonize that particular space? So I would not have wanted to make it at large, but you know, if it's at large to some people, then I need to bring it home to say, let's do the thinking and the implementation, right? Well, now we understand these issues. And the issue of dress is quite interesting because when Ted Wilson, because I think this is helpful, especially to Black Adventists who worship whiteness. When Ted Wilson goes to East Africa, he wears their garbs to church. He dresses like they dress when he goes to church. Now, a white man has gone to church on Saturday without a tie. Why don't you do the same? And another thing is xenophobia and ethnic tensions and relations. I think these guys should come up with a separate topic on that because of course it's issues of identity, but if you're dealing with race and put xenophobia and put ethnic identities and stuff and all those kinds of things, or ethnic tensions and nationalism and stuff, it becomes muddled up. But I think if you have another space where you actually discuss issues of ethnicity, issues of xenophobia, issues of identity, issues of inclusive worship. You cannot, in a church in South Africa, have a church with Malawians, Zimbabweans, Zambians, Ugandans, and you only have South Africans presenting in a program throughout the day, and you only have Zambians presenting in a program throughout the day, and you only have Zimbabweans presenting in a program every other 3 Sabbaths of the month every year, you know, you give a very terrible negative impression about the church. And there's an argument, back home argument, oh, we're all equal before Christ, those who don't want are led by the devil and stuff. No, you can't. The optics actually matter more than spirituality to some people. Because once you exclude certain people, you're trying to tell us something. And then you have elders writing on Facebook that South Africa is an unentered area. Even if you're disrespectful, you can do that just behind closed doors. You write on Facebook, South Africa is an unentered area. And therefore we can have other people running the show while South Africans are sitting there. You know? And these are the things that you want to shy talking about because we're equal, all of us, before God. There's a day I found my son arguing with his mother the other day. He was 4 or something. He was saying, Mommy, so a woman can't preach at church. You know? And it was because he's never seen a woman preaching in his church. So he believed that. And South African kids will believe that South Africans can't preach at church. South Africans can't do programs at church. Only Zimbabweans can. Or Zimbabweans can't do programs at church. Only South Africans can because they see it. Malawians can't do programs in church because they are seeing it, right? The optics matter and are important to spirituality. So that needs a separate program, really. It was largely comments, right? I think I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I hope everyone is happy with their answers. SK is happy. Andrew's happy. So at this point, I'm going to take. Should I take all 4?
Take them if they're going to be short. It's fine.
Okay. Okay. Let's not put them in a corner.
All right. No, they can.
Let me take 2 and then we'll take 2 again. Linda, I've asked you to unmute you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Sanbonan. Am I clear? Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Good afternoon, Prof. Mina, my question is largely on implementation. It's good. It's commendable that we have, had Isbindi to identify these things and see where they stem from and see where the problem is. How do we then, in an orderly, in a Christian and in a, because we'll never be politically correct anyway if we're fighting a particular system like racism, right? But in a way that is acceptable before God, how do we then tackle such issues? And my question stems from the fact that the way the Black person has been so colonized, it is even hard to convince your own, brother, your own neighbor, to say, but this is not how God wanted us to do things, or this stems from a white mind or stems from a Eurocentric view. It's even hard, as it is when you speak about decolonizing our worship. There are already people in the church, Black people, who will give you the side eye because the mind has been oppressed for so long. It has become literally hard for them to see things in a different way. A simple example. I was sharing this with my husband when the year started. We do the 10 days of prayer thing, and we've always done that, and we've never really known who contributes, who writes. Is it one person? Is it a whole lot of people? And then boom, all of a sudden this year, we had the 10 days of prayer, and everything was branded by Mark Finley, by Mark Finley. Look, I have no problem with Mark Finley, okay? I love his sermons and everything. But why is it that we have come to a point where we accept that this thing looks like it belongs to one person, you know? And if the 10 days of prayer thing is an open thing to say anyone can really write the devotions and everything, why haven't we heard of an invitation to say we're looking for authors to help us with this project? Because angithi, it belongs to all of us, right? And we are all participating in this thing. And so when you raise such questions, you look unholy. You sound crazy. You sound like you are going off way. You understand? And so that's the extent at which the Black mind has been oppressed and kept in prison for so long. So, and it is my belief that if you are going to fight a system as big and as powerful as racism, you need to have a united people. But Tina as Black people, we don't even understand the half of us that we are oppressed. And so it feels as though the first job is to wake people up and open their eyes and say, dude, like, open your eyes. Something is not right with this. And after then convincing them of that, then fight the system. What is the implementation? What are the steps that we ought to take? Steps that are going to be beneficial for the Black Christian, for the Black Adventist, and also steps that are acceptable before God. Because at the end of the day, we are still children of God. We are still, mandated to also treat people the way Christ would want us, to treat them. And it's also a very real thing that I think we spoke about this in the chat, to say that something has to be done. I think this is where we must start. Desmond Tutu once said something interesting. In fact, I think he took the statement from Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel said, we must always take sides. That's what Elie Wiesel says we must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor and never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor and not the tormented. And so these are things that we cannot keep silent about. These are things that we cannot, after knowing about, after being opened eyes about, then not do anything. God is expecting us to do something, because if the Son of God was sacrificed, he was given as ransom for the whole world, for the person in Europe and for the person in Jamaica and for the person in Africa, right? And so we must do something. That is something that is on the table, whether we like it or not. The ball is in our hands. And Desmond Tutu then added to say, if an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse, and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. And so we cannot afford to be a people that are neutral, especially when it is us, Tina, who are actually oppressed. You understand? Because it's crazy. I can cite different examples. I was watching EGC session in 2015, and one of our famous preachers, our advocate, stood up to make a point of order. He didn't even get 30 seconds, and it was just thrown off like that. And you look at what he was talking about, and you look at the other guys, and they're talking pretty much the same thing, and the other guys get like 2 minutes to give their point of orders. You understand? So this thing goes even as deep as the meetings that go on, meetings that actually govern how we're going to do things. This was a session that was also talking about women ordination. It's not like what they decide they won't affect us, right? And so we ought to have a say in it, but we don't even get to have 2 minutes of saying what we feel, what we think, what we have discovered, what we want as a people, and so we ought to do something. But my question now is, how do we acceptably then be the person that does not take neutrality, but says something about the mouse that is being stepped on by the elephant? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Linda. That's a clear question. Van Heeden and Zaza, I'll just settle on you for now, and then after that, there's a follow-up, we'll gift, Ash, and we'll be landing this plane shortly. We'll be landing it shortly. Van Heeden, I've asked to unmute you.
Okay, I'm gonna speak on about two issues. I'm gonna speak on this is Testimonies, Volume 9, and it should be page 206, paragraph 3. She says, in regard to white and colored people worshiping in the same building, this cannot be followed as a general custom with profit to either party, especially in the South. The best thing will be to provide the colored people who accept the truth with places of worship of their own, in which they can carry on with the services by themselves. This is particularly necessary in the South in order that the work for the white people may be carried on without serious hindrance. I'm not saying I'm for or against, but that's what she says in Testimonies, Volume 9. So maybe those churches that are turning away Black people took counsel from this book. I'm not sure. Now, I want to speak about, okay, now I'm on another book. It's Testimonies, Volume 9. And this is what I want to comment in relation to the second slide of the presentation, which was the definition of racism. And I quote, paragraph 1, I'm going to skip paragraph 3, paragraph 2, I'm going to skip paragraph 3 and go to the last. Okay, at Rochester, New York, December 25, 1865, I was shown many things concerning the people of God in connection with his work for these last days. I saw that many professed Sabbath keepers will come short of everlasting life. They failed to take the warning for the course pursued by the children of Israel and fall into some of their evil ways. If they continue in these sins, they will fall like the Israelites and never enter the heavenly Canaan. Now, all these things happened unto them for examples, and they are written for admonition upon whom the ends of the world are come. I'm going to skip the third paragraph, and now I'm on page 534, paragraph 1. The book is Testimonies, Volume 1. Their principles and positions in political matters are a great hindrance to their spiritual advancement. These are a constant snare to them and a reproach to their faith, to our faith. And those who retain these principles will eventually be brought just where the enemy would be glad to have them, where they will be finally separated from Sabbath-keeping Christians. These brethren cannot receive the approval of God while they lack sympathy for the oppressed colored race and are at variance with the pure Republican principles of our government. God has no more sympathy with rebellion upon the earth than with rebellion in heaven. When the great rebel questioned the foundation of God's government and was thrust out with all who sympathized with him in this rebellion. Now, why am I saying this? The second slide said that it is not possible for a person of color to be racist. And I disagree with that position, and I've always disagreed with it, because that position has opened up people of color to be racist towards white people and not having any consequences for that. I'll give an example. Remember Penny Sparrow? She went to a beach in Durban, and there were bottles all over the beach. And she commented and said something like, these monkeys, left left the beach in a sad state, and the whole country was up in arms with Penny Sparrow, and she was actually sentenced. Fast forward a couple of years forward, there's this lady in here in the north. I think it was in Northgate or North Riding. There was an accident or something that happened, and she saw the Metro Cop. She said something to the Metro Cop, and she also ended up in prison for being racist. In both instances, Penny Sparrow and this lady were labeled racist. Now, how many Black people have called white people names and have met the same fate that Penny Sparrow and this white lady, I've forgotten the name, have met the same fate of these two people? I can assure you that on a daily basis, if white people had to go to a police station to report the number of times they've been called names and slurs used on them, the police stations would be inundated to a point where they would not find it necessary to open dockets anymore. Now, for the sake of this presentation, I will identify myself as colored. Now, colored in the sense that I'm mixed race. But when you meet me, if you see me, I would easily fit in any Black community, because the only thing that gives away that I'm colored is my surname. But I look as Black as most Black people. I was raised by my Black grandmother, and I went to a Black church, and only those who knew my surname would identify me as a colored. Now, a slur was used on me by the presenter himself, where he called me a mulatto. Now, and
So,
it is because of
want
that.
to address this now, because
Yes.
I'm ready for it, and you
Yes,
don't want
yes.
it to get here. Luanda, do you want it to go past this?
Yeah, we still have some more hands, but I'm not sure. If you
No,
are
I'm saying this kind of a question because it's turning toxic now, and it's
Okay,
infra for me. I want, if you want it to be toxic, I can go lower, but
You know,
I'm not.
it's fine. Is it fine with you, Van Heelen, if he addresses it?
No,
Or you just
I am saying, all I am saying is that it is possible for racism to be in any direction. It can be perpetrated by a white person, and it can be perpetrated by a Black person. There is no way that you can say that a Black person cannot be racist because it gives you the ammunition to then be racist towards white people or people of other races without suffering any consequences for it.
Okay, my king, let's give him a chance to address it, and then we'll just pick up. Sorry for that, ne? You just mark your thoughts. We'll pick up right where you left off after I could address the question. Go ahead, Prof.
Okay, I don't know how helpful this conversation is when someone accuses me of racism. And okay, this is difficult for me because the plane at which I'm speaking at is at a much more higher level than than where I'm being drawn to.
Okay.
And I've actually said this clearly. Racism involves the subordination of people of color by white people. And there's a huge body of literature on race studies that, by the way, for the benefit of the question, Rothenberg, 2013, page 120, I'm quoting directly from Rothenberg. These are not my words, for context. And I do agree with Rothenberg that Black people cannot be racist, right? They don't have capacity to be racist. And this is clear that individual persons of color may well discriminate against a white person or another person of color because of their race. But this will not qualify as racism, right? Racism calls white people to depend on all institutions of society to enforce and extend their personal dislike and discrimination of others. And what are these institutions? You have your legal institutions, you have your academic institutions, you have your religious institutions, you have your economic institutions, you have your political institutions, your economic power institutions. So all these institutions actually facilitate the expression of racism to an extent that when a white person expresses discrimination against other people, they are backed up by those institutions.
Okay.
Right? And if you're backed up by a racist system, you cannot be any other, you cannot achieve or have any other label apportioned to you besides that of being a racist, right?
Yeah.
Without the backing of all these institutions, Black people have the capacity to discriminate against white people. But that's not racism, it's discrimination, right? And this is a clear black and white synthesized sort of a version of a huge body of literature on race and racism that if one was to care to read deeply on it, you'd actually find this. And I think at an intellectual level, it's quite clear, right, on what racism, how racism forms, or what racism is, right? And then the second issue, it is important to read Ellen White in context, because just like the Bible, there are certain things that don't apply today that are in the Bible that are quite, they're not giving us instructions on how to do certain things. Slaves, obey your masters, for instance. It's in the Bible, but it's not applicable now, right? Sacrifice of animals and the like, not applicable, but it's in the Bible. When Ellen White writes about the South, remember, the South and the North, in the North, while slaves are freed, in the South, they remain enslaved. And it remains deeply racist that white people who actually associated with blacks were killed. Ellen White's son was about to be killed, or threats to be killed, because the son was not raised to be racist. He thought associating with blacks was fine, right? And they go to the South. They think that as Adventists, they can actually worship together with blacks. But members of the community, the racists, don't want blacks to mix together. And then Ellen White says, no, guys, there is this danger that exists in this type of America during slavery. So in that particular context, and this is locked and located in one context, and not fluid enough to apply to South Africa in this day and age, and therefore cannot be used in the current world except for historical reference and purposes, right? So the issue that Ellen White raises falls off and doesn't apply in this current world. And this is why it's quite important to read Ellen G. White in context. And if we do that, it will actually give us it will actually give us sort of a much more clear understanding of where we're coming from, where we're moving to, right? Even though Ellen White preached a gospel of non-racism, and she endorsed separate worship, and that didn't make her racist, it made a strategy. Because if you worship with black people, if you bring black people to your church, you'll be killed. So what do? Facilitate that they worship by themselves. Give them all the support that they need. Don't mix with them, so that these dangers that might arise don't arise. I submit this under correction, but Ellen White's son actually was threatened with death. I think he was there. If it's not the son, it was probably somebody else, right? So this is the context that is quite important, that will lead us into arriving. I don't want to venture into issues of Brixton Church Board, and I won't wake up and call someone a mulatto one morning without context. So I'm not, that is infra dignitatem to me, especially this particular presentation. I won't go there.
Okay.
And then Uma Mkwanas, she asked about issues of implementation in an orderly and Christian way. This is important to how to engage and how to sort of bring our views across and all these kinds of things. There is, for record purposes and for fairness, a black man who is working for Bible Research Institution, a Ghanaian guy. He actually wrote a quarterly in 2017 or 2015 or so. A Ghanaian guy wrote a quarterly for us, right? Which is quite important. But then again, the locus of enunciation becomes important in our Christianity. Where is he located? Where is he writing from, right? And who is paying his salary and all those kinds of things. And Africans, we have not been cultured into writing, but thank God now we can, because we have lots of people in the academy, lots of people are pastors who can do this. And one of the most painful things in the Adventist church is that the church controls you in such a way that when you're getting a salary from them, you cannot deviate from the Eurocentric configurations of the church. The GC communicates with your SIT with your union, whatever, and then it filters down to you. Our pastors are not given any space to think, right? Once you start thinking, then you're out of the system. So for us as individuals, one would be starting your own printing press in Africa and trying to do that. And actually Africans are able to do this if you put funds aside for it. There's an argument that God stays at the conference or the storehouse is at the conference and therefore all the monies have to go there. But if you find ways of marshalling funds for certain things, you can do that. But you need a willing leadership in the church, in the conference, in the SIT, which you will never find, by the way. You will never find, by the way, because most of our church leaders are not in leadership for the spiritual advancement of Africa. Or there's a paycheck attached to that. There's your children's school fees. There's free accommodation. There's a trip to the GC where you as Pastor Papua said, most people spend time getting second-hand toothbrushes. You know, so there's lots of things that militate against free thinking for Africans. But if we start an agitation for these things to change, and by the way, they can change, especially if you organize yourselves as Africans. Do you know that you can have an Africans like your students did at Andrews University? You can have Africans who actually want this particular change to come up and write a petition and say, this is what we want, and push for it, right? You have pastors who are outside the system now who are thinkers. You have your academics within the system who are Adventists. Adventism has no space for academics, by the way, so. So they can do it from a parallel sort of strategic position. But this thing needs to be well thought out and done. It's possible to do, but it's impossible to bring Africans together for a project that advances them, which rails against their imaginations of a white God, a Eurocentric religion. You know, that would be a difficult feat, but it's achievable, it's possible.
So Adventism not having a space for academic thinkers or academics, it has yes men, am I correct?
And that's what you have.
All right, let's go back to Van Heiden, just to wrap up your thoughts, my leader. Check if you are happy with the response, and then jet us off because we are shutting it down. We are winding it out now. Van Heiden, Zaza, G, last person is SK. If you still want to say something, please raise your hand now because we are landing. I'm officially landing this plane at this point. Van Heiden, go ahead.
Oh, it's Nosy this time.
Hi, Nosy.
Yeah, I just want to, you know, though Prof earlier said that maybe we need a separate discussion for, you know, the hatred between, you know, Blacks, but I think it ties in. And I'm going to further say it even ties in with, because honestly, with me, this whole racism thing, I feel like it's exactly the same that we experience as women. And sometimes our experiences as women are dismissed. So the same way where you said last week you experienced racism, or someone went to a white church and they were chased away to go to their own people, etc. And when you report such cases, you are dismissed as, oh, bring evidence, or it's not important. And I feel this is the struggle that women have. And personally, I feel that the whole racism thing, it for me, it's a secondary struggle. My primary struggle is being a woman, and the same complaints that you have. You did touch on it in your presentation when you started, that there's certain privileges that men have, whether they are Black or white, that we don't enjoy as women. And I feel that unless our struggle also is acknowledged, for me, the whole racism thing, it's like it's like I said, secondary, you know. And also, until we learn to unite as a people, I feel this is it's like a non-starter, you know. Until we learn to be united, I don't see how we will dismantle any of these challenges that we are presented with. I don't see it happening now, and I don't see it happening ever. So I don't know how we'll tackle this, but that's my contribution. It's not so much of a question, it's more of a comment and a contribution.
Thanks, Noel.
Thank you
There's
so
a
much.
book by Bell Hooks on Black people and salvation, Black people, salvation and love, or something like that, where she says there's no free Black man if the Black woman is not freed, right? We will never achieve racial justice. We will not eradicate racism as Black people if our women are not liberated. So in a way, we have to fight for the liberation of the Black woman first as the Black man before we tackle issues of race and racism, so that we have a formidable army to actually fight this. And creating unity amongst Blacks is one of the most difficult things, extremely difficult. I don't know whether it's coloniality or the damage that colonialism has done to our psyche and conceptions and imaginations of our communities, and also imaginations of what can be achieved when we are united. That unity is something that's needed, but something that is very difficult to actually think of.
Yeah. So we'll take Uzaza, GSK. These are closing comments, Bazarane. We are wrapping it up now. Yeah? Closing comments. I don't know which to Ash or Umta, the last person. And then we're taking it back to you, Prof, so that you can do us deliverables and then we wrap it up. All right, Zaza, I've asked to unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi guys, hope you're all well. I would like to agree with Prof on the statement he said that Adventist, actually in Adventism, you're not allowed to think. Actually, if you think, you have to either leave the church or they're not thinkers. The minute you think, you're supposed to be out of the system. Like the Animal Farm, the book, where which speaks about the animal. There are more. All animals are equal, but there are animals that are more equal than others. As much as we going to try and talk about this, it's not going anywhere. Possibly until Christ comes, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge. That is why we find some thinkers, especially the young, leaving the church. We might blame it on alcoholism and other things, but the church has, or the young people in the church have become thinkers. And the more you think, the more you realize how colonized our system is. And the church is. I have a problem with, I wanted to join Master Guide. And when I looked at the curriculum, I realized this is not relevant to me. There are certain things in the curriculum that I'm like, but no, this is not even African. Why should I do something that is applicable for someone in Europe or in the US I was like, I'm not gonna do this. So I think I'm one of those rebels that I'm in the church, but I'm not fully in, because I'm a thinker. I allow myself to question a lot of things. And the minute I question things, the more I'm told that I'm a rebel. You need to take the Bible as it is, or Ellen White as whatever I say there, you don't question things. I grew up in a very conservative home. So a lot of things were very sinful. Like, geez, you need to dress like this when you go to church and all that. Then after varsity, I realized that, man, these things are oppressing. Why do I have to for first things first, why should I be at church the whole day? This is tiring. It's information overload. You listen in the morning, afternoon, and all that, because we've been told that you keep the Sabbath at church, and that is it. You can't question it. And the dressing as well. The dancing at church. I love dancing at church. I love my own music, the rock music, and we've been told that when you play certain music, you inviting demons. When you play a drum, an African drum, you inviting demons. So basically, for me to be a true a true Adventist, I have to forsake being African and be somehow Western in my thinking, so that I'm an approved, proper Adventist. I started having issues with those. Then I'm like, okay, then now the issue is, what then? Like what the Ulinda said, the implementation, we have read, we have become thinkers, and like you say, that we not allowed to think. If you are thinking, then you need to leave the system. So how do we stay in the system and be thinkers without having to leave the church entirely?
All right, thank you, Zaza. As for you not being fully in the church, lol. G and Ash, I've asked to unmute you.
Hi, it's Ashley.
Hello.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Shepherd, for the lovely presentation. It's really eye-opening. So on my side, what I've really noticed regarding the church and racism is, for an example, when it comes to, and a lot of people have mentioned this now, but when it comes to someone presenting in front of the church, it becomes a hoo-ha if they're not wearing a tie, right? But imagine in the Western countries where the temperatures get up to 45 degrees. Is it really, do you really need to put on a tie and a suit and everything? What happened regarding apartheid is the white people made black people to believe that no one amongst them is good enough. So if one black person succeeds, a white person will not be your enemy. Guess who will be your enemy? A fellow black person. So in me saying that is, I'm trying to, let me just go further than that. The reason why we worship our services in a Western manner is because of the brainwash that the white person has put in us. That if we do not do what the white person says is right, everything else is wrong. Let's take it to the corporate world. What I've noticed, the tactic that most directors use is, in each division, they will tell that person who's the head of that division, I trust you, I trust no one else. They go to the next person, I trust you, I trust no one else. That causes division, mistrust against each other, because everyone is thinking, I am buddies with the boss, he trusts me, he doesn't trust that next person. And in doing that, it causes disharmony against each other, because you are trying to please the boss. So with apartheid, that mentality happened, where black people now feel like what is right is what the white people say. But I mean, it's even coming with singing. Guitar was accepted by the white people, so it's fine to bring it to the church. What if I've got a special item that I want to sing and I've got my little drum that I want to beat? Is that wrong? You know, we have to learn to change and also accept our Africanism, to worship in our African way, than to think that whatever the white person says is right is the only thing that's right. So I feel like we should move away from that apartheid mentality, because it's the one thing that's making us not to prosper. Even when it comes to hymn books, when someone wants to do a hymn book, I don't know if we've tried it, but should we try it? I'm hoping that it's not a fellow black person who will crash it down, because at the end of the day, we have that mentality that the next fellow black person shouldn't be greater than me. So if we crash that, we as black people can exceed in anything. Thank you. My husband has...
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm getting an overload of comments. So Gift, you'll come after this. You if you read Ngugi wa Thiong'o's Decolonizing the Mind, there's a section where it speaks about how in European colonized schools, children were expected to speak English, so there will be a card that when you speak vernacular, you get given. And then the next person speaks vernacular, you give them. And then at the end of the day in school, then everyone is asked, where did you get the card from? Then all those who spoke vernacular in that day get punished. And Ngugi argues that at one point, this is where Black people are taught how to sell out each other. You know, the trusted only one Black, the only Black, you know, comes out of that. The better Black comes out of that particular system. And this is not only apartheid, but colonialism in general actually created this disunity, not only among Black people, but among families. Colonialism led to a system where parents would not even raise their own children, show love to their own children, and all those kinds of things, you know. So we have, it's now in our system, the lessons of colonialism that instead of building and loving each other, I think the best possible thing we can do and feel full achievement out of it is destroying each other, you know. And Uzaza is asking, how do people that are thinkers stay in the church and stuff? I don't know. I really don't know. But the best way is to just go to church, sit down and not contribute anything and just leave after the service. Because you'll be depressed, no ends, you know. You deal with people of diverse thoughts and diverse levels of thinking, and you might be patient or impatient about it and stuff. But for me, I find it depressing that the best thing is just to go to church and just let them do whatever they do, and then leave it at that. I see Linda is complaining that I didn't answer your question. I can't remember the question. If she may ask again. Prachi.
You go on. Oh, sorry about that. Let me ask you, Chi. Go on.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Prof. We really appreciate the presentation, but maybe for protocol in the order, we're supposed to start it with black to black before we go to black and white, because we as Blacks, we don't see eye to eye. Just for example, just to give you heads up of maybe the Zimbabwean situation, where the majority of people they always think it's always the Shonas versus the Ndebeles. So, but there are other people in between who are neither Ndebele nor Shonas. You know, for example, Shona is not one. Shona is divided. There is Manicaland. But some of the people, it's blue and white. It's either you're Ndebele or you're Shona. But at the same time, we're not even united in our small circles. So if we unite as Blacks, then we can actually go with one united front and attack the whites. But for now, the whites are benefiting because Blacks are not united. Look at Dudula. Look at what happens in most of our churches. Unity is not there. And at the same time, there are also people who are police keepers, you know, who see racism everywhere. You know, when you wake up in the morning, you want to see racism already. So you see what you're looking for. And there's also people who are looking for tribalism in everything. So those are the things that we need to deal with. Once we deal with that, maybe we can be on the same position and move forward as a united front. Stay to the point. Thank you, my leader.
Thank you so much, Chi. SK, can I take M? Because we know you already commented. And then using our 2:30 conversations. And then back to you, Prof. Please just wrap it up for us. M, I've asked you to unmute you. Go ahead.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, sir.
Okay, awesome. But yabona Linda be racism, it starts with us uthi Tina, we need to make things right. I-church ngeyethu. I-church ayisiyo ye-GC. The biggest issues that we have currently in the church is
it me or is it
with really our local.
Yeah, I think it's adjusting on.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Go on.
You might need to start at-
All right, just look at it this way. Look at the GC
boy
structure. Look at charge of the health health department. I think that guy is a trained doctor. Look at the guy who's in charge of education. That guy is a trained personnel in that. But you look at our own local.
I'm losing. Who are those people you're talking about? Is it GC or conference or what?
I'm looking at the GC currently.
Okay.
Come down to the conference. So at the local conference, we are gonna see a pastor who's got a bachelor's, doesn't even have a master, doesn't even have a PhD, and we take him for good health. Now, when we see things that came from Ellen White times, when we see we don't understand, we start asking questions, and the person does not understand, doesn't even know how to answer us. So any challenge could be that the people that we are voting into office, they are not even qualified, not even a conference leader. I think that could be one way of tackling some of these issues that we are currently having in the church. The people that are putting there are not actually qualified to be there. Yes, they are pastors, but is that pastor qualified to lead that particular department? I think that could be one way of tackling some of the issues that we're currently facing as a church. That's my submission.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think I could pick up.
I missed maybe 60% of what you're saying, but from guessing is you're speaking about the structuring from the GC down to our churches and stuff. And one of the problems is the church is not professionally run. By the way, there's a pastor who in 2019, I think, told me, we're just talking, and then he says, church members complain about racism. Do they know what we go through at the conference as Black pastors? That is telling. That is telling. If you hear, you're not even a pastor, your salary doesn't come from the church, you're complaining about racism, and then your Black pastor says, yo, guys, we're going through a lot there, right? So you realize that the change that Uzaza wants us to think about will not come through the church or via the church channels, as it were, but through some forms of protests and some forms of engagements and some forms of giving people deadlines and all that. By the way, do you know that Black churches are afraid of confronting their conferences on most things? They don't want, they can't. They're so scared. It's as if God lives there at the conference. And the imagination that the pastor can take care, is taught to take care of spiritual needs of the church. The pastor is not a planner. The pastor is not an economist to run the finances of the church. The pastor is not a strategist to model ways of outreach and stuff. You know, what would be wrong with having mathematicians and physicists and other people planning and modeling your evangelism strategies? Huh? You look at look at Rand Park Ridge, for instance, or look at the squatter camps, since you like squatter camps so much and evangelizing to the poor. And look which churches have a stronghold there. How are you going to enter those particular churches? Study other churches, because a pastor who comes and tells you your uncles and your aunties are lawyering you or they're bewitching you gets a huge following, right? A pastor in Zimbabwe who comes and tells you your ID numbers and puts money into your bank accounts gets a huge following and even becomes an ambassador of the country. Study those. You don't need pastors to do those kinds of things. You need people who are strategic thinkers, and then say, what is our best way of entering into this particular space or particular field? Oh, can we build hospitals? Can we build schools? Can we put money into people's ATMs? Can we do that? Can we give them milk? Can we give them honey? Can we build them houses? Can we do free health? Can we do food parcels? Can we create jobs? Can we, and you know, but it took a few of us here to actually protest to the GC when Ted Wilson wrote about when George Floyd died. He never mentioned about George Floyd and other people were killed by the police. It was kumbaya to him, yeah, just condemning the protest and stuff and all that. And after we protested, that's when George Floyd's name arises. And a war in Ukraine starts. Adventist Church, we have our members in Ukraine. Let's pray. Let's send whatever and all that kind of thing. Where was the church when America, where the church started? America was bombing Iran, Iraq, flattening down some countries in the Middle East. The church was quiet. They were silent. And for us to understand this, look at how the global media reported about the invasion of Ukraine, because it's white people. At one level, we're told, oh, these are people like me and you. These are journalists talking to people in the street. They're like me and you, Europeans. So this war is painful, is terrible. When it was Afghanistan, it was never like that. When it was Iraq, it was never like that. Iran, it was never like that. And then you have other journalists telling us, no, this is not Afghanistan, it's civilized Europe. And the church actually takes a script from that and say, we have our members there, we need to intervene and all those kinds of things. And we ask the questions, where was the church when the other things happened? And it shows you the racist nature of the church. There's no other way to explain this. No other way, because white people navigate this world whitely and they never question their whiteness and the powers that they have, right? And it's a classic racism sort of case from the church, especially at the top. And the fact that you don't have presidents of other conferences in Africa challenging this just shows you where our thinking lies. And it's a few outliers of us who protest and write to them. And by the way, the arrogance of African church leaders at conferences and SID, whatever levels, they do something wrong. You write to them, they just respond and say noted. And that's the end. You know, Ubraji speaks about black on black, whatever, and all those kinds of things, which is true. But sometimes optics matter. Optics matter. If I said this before, if you're a multiracial, multinational, multi-gendered church, it has to show in your programming and in your participation. There is no two ways about it, right? And if you have a situation where 60% of your programming actually speaks contrary to diversity and inclusion, then you invite other forms of thinking in protest, right? Instead of blaming, instead of us blaming people for pointing our wrongs, let's sit down and face ourselves and say, guys, what is it that we're doing? What can we do better?
All right. Okay. The last two comments, SK and 230 conversations, and then Skalama deliverables. And I'm noticing something, guys. I'm sensing a lot of intolerance with each other today, and it's not usual. So I'd like to humbly plead, Guti, let's respect each other's viewpoints. Let's engage with each other from a point of view of respect in the spirit of the church that we are part of. So having said that, I humbly plead that let's maintain a form of unity. All right, SK, and then 230 conversations. You'll just wrap it up for us, and then Prof, deliverables, and then we pray and we close. We are done. SK, go on, sir.
Sure, can you hear me?
We can hear you, good sir.
Okay. Yeah, just maybe 2 points here. It brings more harm to always have a finger pointed at someone. You know, someone who's always having an eye of a mistake on someone else. They are always bitter. And then if we look at white versus blacks, and from the negative point of view, we will always create a generation or a group of people who hates white people, and which is also problematic. We also have a problem on how to decolonize the mind, because we have white people who think black people don't think at all. We also have black people who just think black people, white people are just supremacist. They don't care. So as a result, we have divided white people and black people. I think we should somehow find a way of correcting that. This morning, I noticed something like in the Sabbath school class when I was commenting. Always this white dude, after I commented, he will comment to correct what I'm saying. You know, always he'll comment to correct what I'm saying. But others, they would agree to what I'm saying. Then I noticed that no, it is how he's brought up. He was never exposed to engaging with black people without being superior to them. So always when he's engaging with black people, maybe they're in the farms and telling black people what to do. So I didn't take it personal, but I just noticed that it's a matter of mind. So same has to apply to black people. We need to find a way of decolonizing black people as well. So the second thing is that our speaker mentioned that Adventism doesn't have a space for academics. I would like to disagree there. I know of a place, I don't know, there's a village or what. I think it's a village where all the most educated people there, your doctors, your principals of the schools, all of them are Adventist. And there is a rumor that says that this is the church of the educated people, you know. And I'd like to think people, whenever they say academics, maybe the church hates people who think. Maybe it is basically pointing to people who think against, not necessarily thinking, but just against something, because we have a lot of thinkers who are Adventist. And okay, let's say fine, academics or thinkers are there in church, and you feel like you don't have a space in the Adventism. How about you think of a way of uniting with them instead of focusing on something that is separating you from the church? You know, So how about we think of that, since we're thinkers, how about think of ways that will unite us, not ways that will separate us. Most people who left the church and formed their own groups, it is because they think they had a better way than the Adventist church. So as a result, they will leave the church and start their own church. And you'd wonder, in their church, they will still have the same problem of other people. They don't like how they run the church. So they were thinkers, but now they are being accused of the same thing that caused them to leave the church. So I think the church has its own faults since it's run by people. But at the same time, if you find yourself in a position of thinking better than people running the church, I think you must come up with ways that helps the church instead of coming up with ways that points the mistakes of the church. Thank you.
Thank you, SK. S230 conversations, wrap it up.
Thanks, Boot. Just a few things. The first one, I just want to say, I think it's a sad presentation in the sense that the audience, are black. There's no white people here. Sort of like defeats the purpose because we communicating, between each other. And this message is not meant for us. And I'm gonna touch on two comments: the one that came from Van Heerden in the chat section, as well as the one that came from Gift. But before I get there, the professor's opening video dealt with the issue that was at Andrews University. Those black students convened and addressed issues between themselves and, sort of like jotted down what the issues were. They were well researched. They spoke to existing structures. They spoke to, historic atrocities. And once that was done, they compiled a video. Their intention was never for that video to be shared with black people, as in, it wasn't addressed to black people. It was addressed to the white people that are in leadership. And the white people that are in leadership then responded to that video. They were the ones that were given 1 week. It wasn't, let's do a 1 week thing to arouse black people to become awakened to these things. It was, we're giving the institution 1 week to reform, to apologize, and to address to us what structural reforms are going to be put in place to make Andrews University a better place for the minority groups, which is what the president, as well as the top tier structures, did in response to that. But unfortunately with this, we can only hope that there is some white people, not just any white person, there's some white people in leadership that will one day stumble upon this presentation, listen to it, listen to the grievances that are shared here, and then come back and say, we have listened to what is being spoken about on 230 conversations. We will not even try and defend ourselves. We acknowledge that this is the truth and that this is existing. And just as Andrews University did, they will genuinely, come back and then say, we are, committed to bringing a difference, and this is how we intend on doing it. And then invite, the black people to some sort of a dialogue to resolve these issues. That being said, and before I tackle the two issues that sort of stood out for me, somebody phoned me this morning and said to me, I see that you guys are going to have a discussion on religion and racism. And then they said, what does that have to do with my spirituality? Let me start off with two things here. The first one is a comment from Van Heerden, where he was saying that he or she, I'm not sure who was typing there, but it was said that sometimes it's important for minority groups to group themselves to reach out to each other in a foreign nation. And he was referring to the Portuguese having a chat, I think, in Malvin and stuff like that. It just so happened that I recently had a discussion on something similar. And we were speaking about the Portuguese church as well as the Malawian Adventist Association of South Africa, MASA. And I love MASA. I've worked with MASA a lot of time. So it's a group that has an association in South Africa. They have their churches. When you're invited there, you know that I'm going to preach at the Malawian church. They have their camp meetings, etc., etc. So they're a community of Malawians within South Africa. The same goes for the Portuguese that are in Malvern. Now, if you were to interrogate these groupings, and you go deeper, and interrogate them, these are groups of comfort, but they are very senseless if you think about it. Because how do you evangelize? Let's just think, let's be pragmatic about this. You've got a Malawian church in Tembisa, right? Just think about it for a second and apply your mind to this. You've got a Malawian church in Tembisa. These people are congregating every Saturday in Tembisa, right? And their services are predominantly carried out in the Chichewa language, with here and there an interpreter to interpret in the English language. Who are they reaching out to in Tembisa? So think about the gospel. Let's talk about the Great Commission that has been given to us. Let's speak about the pillars of Adventism. And you ask yourself, who is this group evangelizing to in Tembisa? If anything at all, think about the Tembisa folks that see these guys congregating every day, and they ask, what benefit do we derive from this group? How do you leave Malawi, find yourself in South Africa, setting up a church within a South African community, and you do not bother, to acquaint yourself with the local languages, come up with intuitive ways as to how to reach out to them, to the local community. But if anything, you are segregating yourself into a small grouping that is aimed at facilitating and meeting the needs of your own people. If that is not selfish, then what is? It's a genuine question that you need to ask yourself. And I'm not saying that these are bad people. These are lovely people that we interact with on a daily basis. They're lovely people. These are genuinely good Christians. But the motive, think about it. I mean, Sasa, people are coming and they're burning down your church. You are being attacked. You are strangers to these people. These people don't know you, and they will never, ever know you. If anything, you possess some sort of arrogance, which is beyond measure. And that arrogance will only be determined when you begin to interrogate these things deeply. If you only view them at surface level, you see absolutely nothing wrong. So that's an issue. We cannot speak to comfort. We're not called to be comfortable. And it's not a new occurrence. We know what happened in the Bible. We know that once the disciples had received the Holy Spirit, what they did is that they grouped themselves. Challenges and calamities had to befall them so that they can spread out and go into the entire world to spread the gospel. The gospel did not reach you and me because the Jews decided that they will only preach in Hebrew and keep this thing to themselves. They had to go out there, acclimatize themselves, with different locations, with different cultures, with different groups, become one with the people so that the gospel can be given to them. Not to enter into people's territories and then try and preserve their own cultures and their own ways of doing things and their own languages. That would never have worked. That is not how God intended for this gospel to be spread to the world. If that is the case, then stay where you're coming from. Stay in Zim, stay in Malawi, stay in Angola, stay in Mozambique. If that's the case, if you're moving out there and you're saying, I'm going to evangelize, but you're not willing, to find ways of reaching out to a Zulu person because you are Portuguese, then you're not an evangelist. Imagine if even these missionaries that we speak about, if they came here and they only concentrated on their own, what's the purpose? Where's the missionary, gospel in that? That's the one. Gift says we need to start home. We need to start with the Black people before we go to the white people. It can't be. It cannot be, because what the professor is presenting on is institutionalized tendencies. Racism that is institutional. You cannot speak to institutionalized racism by speaking to and saying, no, Leander, let's be nice to one another. As soon as my conversation with Leander is done, Leander is hungry, Buffett. He's gonna go to a white person who has money and will pay him to hate on me. So that institutionalized racism needs to be exposed. You know, we must expose the structures. It's almost as though, you know, think about it from a political atmosphere. Here is a movement that is aimed at separating Black people and causing, a commotion within the Black community on issues of expropriation and not expropriation, white monopoly capital and what's or not and what's on. And we're busy, man. We're fighting amongst each other. And then Brother Gift will come in and say, no, guys, you know what? Forget about this white monopoly capital. Let's deal with this thing, you know, between you and I. And then it's also we wake up and we realize that there's a huge budget that has been channeled to Bell Pottinger, and that there's a white man behind this movement that you think is just between Blacks. And the moment we begin to understand that it is the exact same thing within a church setup that it is in the political setup, then it will make sense. You know, there was a story about the Davidians that we know, what's that chap's name? I think it's David something, the one that professed to get Adventists together, and then the Waco massacre, as it is known. A lot of SDAs died there. You know, people that believed in the second coming, they were misled by one guy. And if you go and study how that massacre was toned down by the church, how private firms were paid millions and millions of US dollars so that the church can shape, what information is going out there into the communities, and prevent the image of the church from being affected, disassociating the church, from the events that occurred at Waco. Even though those people were proclaimed Seventh-day Adventists, the church spent millions and millions to try and detach themselves from that through propaganda. That still happens. That is the institutionalized racism that we're speaking about. It is not racism that can be sorted out by saying, let's have a bonfire and let's resolve these things amongst us as Black people. It is the same African problem. If you go and tackle this thing historically, how Africa was infiltrated, the amount of monies that were spent there, and until the white man reforms and acknowledges that what he has done is wrong. Because when we say, let's speak amongst each other, that's the same like having a truth and reconciliation platform, which I still have big issues about that whole TRC commission. Because that TRC commission was Black people coming together and then inviting the white men to come and apologize. You don't invite someone to come and apologize. You point out to them that this is wrong, we will not tolerate this wrong must change, and you must acknowledge it. We're not inviting you to come and apologize. You must acknowledge it, and you must acknowledge it genuinely. And we're not fighting. It's not a fight. We're saying that if things are to become well, then the structures need to be reformed. The structures, and if you go and watch that video, it's just, I don't think Dr. Shep played it, but if you check the response from Andrews University, you will see they first acknowledge, they apologize, and then they introduce measures to ensure that what happened previously will not happen again. And once the structure has then changed, then we can then begin speaking to each other as Black people, because there is no structure that will then come and influence us otherwise. Now we can speak that the structure is now clean, brothers and sisters. Let us now be right with one another. And we know that you will not blame the structure to say, no, you want to, but you are now being, influenced Nicodemously. So these issues need to be addressed at a very high level. And sorry, I must just point out that we often get misinterpreted that when we begin to raise these issues, then we are seen as people that are being rebellious. Of course, we are being rebellious to any, what do you call, to any racist structure. You must be rebellious. There's no two way about it. But we are not calling for war. We are not saying that go and kill white people. We are not saying that no, we're forgetting about Jesus and the gospel that we've been called to, and we are now taking up arms and we are fighting white people. We are saying it is difficult for us to serve the Lord. It is difficult for us to carry out the Great Commission within a structure that is oppressing us, within a structure that is making it very, very difficult for us to breathe. So before we can even talk about going and doing God's work, can we please create an environment that allows us to do that? It's not a fight. It's not a war. We're not calling to bend down conferences, etc., etc. We're not being political about this thing. And also, it's not that we're looking for attention or we're looking to be relevant. We are addressing real issues that have a bearing on how we are going to go about carrying out this work that God has entrusted us with. Thank you so much, Lee.
All right, thank you so much. Ashley, it's one of those elders and intellectuals that keep quiet for the whole conversation and they speak last. They shoot at the end. So at this point, Ndala, if your spirit is pushing you to pray for us to close this off, please kindly raise your digital hand because I'm going to ask you to pray for the closing. Prof, over to you. You have the last say.
All right. Okay. Thank you for the contributions, Ashley. So my last say should be simple. That to our white leaders and our white brothers and sisters, especially in the Adventism space, you have a duty to wear your color of whiteness as a badge of shame. And you need to listen to the predicament of your Black congregants and fellow congregants. When I say as a badge of shame, I'm not saying you should be ashamed of being white, but you should be ashamed of the privileges that being white gives you, even though you have not worked for them, you have not done anything to deserve them. And these privileges, you give them yourselves, the system gives you, and Black people who submit unto you give to you. You owe it to think, especially for the Black leaders in the Adventist Church in Africa, who cannot think beyond the thinking that they are given by the leaders from America and other spaces. You owe it to them to think for them that there are possible ways of worshiping in Africa. There are possible ways of thinking in Africa. There are possible ways of coming up with material and programs in Africa that are not satanic, but that help to sustain African communities. There are intelligent people around who can actually look and find out what is necessary and important for the spread of this gospel in Africa, what is necessary and important for the strengthening of the spirituality of the Adventists who are already within the Adventist Church. And to our Black pastors, leaders, and everyone else, you owe it to yourselves and to God and to the congregations that you lead the church in a spiritually mature way, in a spiritually enriching way, in a spiritually directionfulness, as it were, way, where the whole being of the African person is achieved. And I know how difficult it is for some of the leaders who find themselves under the control of whiteness and whiteliness, that sometimes it's difficult to maneuver and to think beyond that particular check. I know that, during colonialism and apartheid, white people who worked with who worked at Black institutions, and mostly Black people, used to get a hardship allowance because working with Black people is imagined by whiteness is very difficult. And I can assume that once you have people who start thinking within the church, especially if they are Black leaders in the church actually view those people as problems and problematic. So you need to lead the church in a liberatory manner that actually empowers ordinary people of the church to flourish in Christ, to flourish as human beings. And lastly, the Black Adventist ordinary church members, one of the most difficult things that the church has never told you is self-reflexivity. As a people who are not self-reflexive, we refuse to put a mirror in front of us, because if it shows us that which we don't like, we start blaming the mirror that it is an agenda. When someone speaks and points out challenges and some things that are not coming up properly in the church and in the system, then that person is angry as an agenda, is bitter. This is how silence culture actually operates. And it's an assumption, by the way. And Black people within the Adventist church continue challenging and writing to your conferences and to your leaders. They don't respond. They say noted. That's the response. Or they ask you to provide whatever evidence and then dismiss you. And this is what they do. And some of us have tried to engage with the church, by the way. We're not speaking from empty spaces. So it's possible to engage with the church, but they will ignore you. And when we speak about the space for thinkers in the church, academics in the church, we're not speaking about people who own bodies on the pews. No. What is their contribution? Are they listened to? Once you start thinking and expressing a different view, you are attacked by both the system and the fellow church members. So it becomes extremely difficult. So it's quite important that we are liberated from that perspective. And we sort of are decolonized in a way that actually leads us into thinking about our religion and faith in a much more sort of at a higher level than maybe we would largely want to think about. So it's quite important that at different levels we work together and try to advance. One of the most important things that we are taught in the church is that of equality, to be against injustice. But we always have a but. We can't support Black Lives Matter because they are communists or because they are what. We can't support Black Lives Matter, as one pastor in the Northern Conference once said in one Zoom platform. White farmers are being killed in South Africa, so white lives also matter. We miss the point in many different ways, even especially as Blacks, right? I think one of the most lastly important things, if you're Black and you subscribe to the inferiority agenda of whiteness, and there are Blacks who are fighting against the system, please don't hold their other hand. Just move out of the way and sit down. That might be your portion and that might be your best contribution.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Gift or Ash, or Gift and Ash, take us to the throne of grace, please.
I will pray, but I still think that advocate misquoted me. He didn't hear what I said, but I'll pray for now. So we will pray. Father in heaven, we come to you this evening. Have mercy upon us. We're fighting many battles, the battle of religion and racism. We pray for the above that you may actually come and give us understanding and give us victory on this. There are some people, Lord, who still hold on to these bad things and they don't want to give up. We pray for the above that you may have mercy upon them and be merciful unto us as well, Lord, as we maneuver through this. Have mercy upon us to restore our relationships. That, Father, as Black people, as Black and white, we may have better communities and live together in peace and in harmony so that we may receive the Holy Spirit. We pray, my Father, that we may overcome the battles of tribalism, the battle of ethnism, that we may come to you as a metropolitan church, as a people, Lord, who are waiting for your second coming. For we know, Lord, that there will be only one heaven. There is no divisions. So we pray, my Father, that the Spirit, the Holy Spirit may comfort us, may guide us. We worship you, we give you praise, we give you honor. Forgive us, Lord, we are sinful people, but Lord, with your blood, we are able to be cleansed and to be cleansed from our minds, from all infirmities. Be with us from now and forever. We even pray for Professor, for the presenter that you've given us this day. Help him, Lord, in his mistakes. Strengthen him where his strengths are. We pray for the above that he may be strengthened more, that your message may reach to the far ends. We pray even for 230 conversations that may continue to impart them knowledge and to impart them wisdom for them, Lord, to be relevant in this time and age. We bless your name. We worship you. Bless each and everyone who was listening, and even people who have time to just go through this conversation, that, Lord, many people may be edified. We worship you. We give you praise. We give you honor. Be with us from now on forever. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. I'll keep you on. Then give just a minute. All right, Saints, we have prayed. We've had an interaction. And this is the part where we just have a after scenes between maybe now and the next 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how the conversation will unpack and unfold. And then we call it a day. We pray that you've been edified. We pray that this was relevant. We pray that the knowledge was shared effectively. And yeah, the choice is yours to make in regards to what you're going to do with the information. Right, so I've asked everyone to be allowed to unmute. Yeah, let's have a quick after scenes and then we call it a day. You are free to unmute if you want to say something. So thank you for the heads up. We are closing Facebook. Thank you for the heads up, Van Heeden. That's one of our own, definitely. He knows the process.